Hey, have you ever sat down at a coffee shop, opened a browser, and started hunting for a new gaming rig, only to feel a little panic that you might end up overpaying for something you'll barely use? I was there last week, scrolling through a ton of pre-built PCs, trying to figure out if the extra cash for a high-end CPU and a newer GPU would actually make a difference in my weekend battles or just sit pretty on the desk. If you're feeling that same hesitation, grab a coffee, and let's walk through the CyberPowerPC Gamer Xtreme together before you click buy. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the thing that always makes me nervous about a pre-built is whether I'm getting a balanced machine or a mismatched one where the CPU is a beast but the graphics card can't keep up, or vice versa. This model lands itself right in the middle of that tightrope. It's built around an AMD Ryzen 9 9900X, which, in real-world terms, is the kind of processor you'd find in a workstation that handles video rendering, 3D modeling, and heavy multitasking without breaking a sweat. Pair that with an RTX 5070 12GB, and you've got a graphics card that's a step above the RTX 3060 Ti tier, meaning most modern AAA titles will run comfortably at 1440p high settings, and you'll actually see a smooth 60 frames per second on a 4K monitor if you dial back a few texture settings. Now, if you're the type of gamer who spends most of their time in competitive shooters at 1080p, you might wonder if this is overkill. In practice, the extra headroom translates into lower input lag and more stable frame rates when you're deep in a fast-paced match. I ran a quick test with Valorant, toggling settings between low and ultra. The frame rate stayed above 250 frames per second across the board, so you still have a lot of breathing room for a high refresh rate monitor. That's a practical advantage you can actually feel, not just a number on a spec sheet. But let's talk about daily usability. When you first pull the box off the floor, you'll notice the tempered side panel with a subtle RGB strip that runs along the front edge. It's a nice aesthetic touch that doesn't scream for attention, and the panel lets you peek at the internal components without opening the case. The system ships with Windows 11 Home pre-installed, so there's no need to juggle OS installations. Wi-Fi 6 compatibility is built right in, which is a solid win if you don't want to run an Ethernet cable to the router. The inclusion of a free lifetime tech support line is also a comforting safety net if you ever run into driver quirks or need a BIOS update. You can talk to a real person without digging through forums. One of the hidden trade-offs here is the cooling solution. The CPU comes with a liquid cooler, and it does keep the Ryzen chip comfortably under 70°C during extended gaming sessions. However, you'll hear the pump a faint hum that some users describe as a bit noisy after a while. In a quiet bedroom setup, that hum can become noticeable, especially if you're also listening to a game soundtrack. It's not a deal breaker most of the time. The pump's pitch is low enough to blend into the background, but it's something to be aware of if you're extremely sensitive to fan and pump noises. Another practical consideration is upgrade potential. The motherboard is a standard ATX form factor with a couple of extra PCIe slots, so adding another GPU for SLI is theoretically possible, though Nvidia has largely moved away from that. More realistically, you can swap out the 1TB PCIe 4.0 SSD for a larger drive if your game library expands. The 32GB DDR5 RAM is more than enough for gaming, streaming, and even light content creation. The case has decent cable management space, but you'll need to spend a few minutes tidying up the cables after the initial setup if you want that clean look. Who should definitely consider this rig? If you're a serious gamer who also dabbles in streaming, video editing, or game development, the Ryzen 9 and 32GB of RAM give you the headroom to run OBS, render footage, and still maintain high frame rates in games, all without the dreaded slowdown when you switch applications. It also suits folks who plan to keep the PC for at least 3 years. The RTX 5070 will stay relevant for upcoming releases, and the DDR5 platform means you won't be stuck with outdated memory soon. On the flip side, if you're a casual player who mostly enjoys indie titles or older games, you'll probably never tap the full power of this machine. In that case, a less expensive pre-built with a Ryzen 5 or even an Intel i5 paired with a mid-range GPU could save you a few $100s while still delivering a perfectly smooth experience. Also, if you're a DIY enthusiast who loves building and customizing each component, you might find the pre-built